What is going on, everyone? If you can't tell, we're recording a little bit different time today, but welcome to the midweek mid-range, and thank y'all for pulling up today. I'm joined by JD and Chris. How are we doing, fellas?
Doing good. What about that game last night?
Yeah, it's not even quite 12 hours old. I guess, just about 12 hours old from the end of it. We're gonna dive into that in a second. JD, you doing okay, man?
Uh, Doing about as good as I could do after a Bucks loss. Full disclosure, if you watched a couple weeks ago, you know I'm a Bucks fan, but yeah, I'm not in panic mode yet, so I'm all right.
Non-panic mode. I'd say that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But before we get too far, the finals. Game one was last night. We're gonna dive into that in detail. That was not the only basketball story this week, right, Chris? There was some pretty big stuff going on.
Yeah, that Rachel Nichols, Maria Taylor stuff was just like so wild and like so expected. Like I love that clip going around of like her apology versus like the length of time of Giannis taking to shoot a free throw. It's just like awesome. And then obviously like this playoffs has been like so weird where like with her apology, I wasn't sure if she was more full of shit with like her apology to Maria or that this was going to be a very exciting final when we didn't know if Giannis was playing or not. So yeah, it's like we'll see if the jump is airs today, and then I kind of want the series to go 7 just to see what will happen like when Maria Taylor's contract ends and if she's going to show up and like do the show if they'll have her on. Hopefully she does. Like she is phenomenal and has not did not deserve that Rachel Nichols fire that she got secretly.
Well, and it's interesting because for a number of reasons, but like there are like it feels like a bajillion. There's probably more like 5 or 6 different avenues to go down, right? So for one, I never really thought of Rachel Nichols and Maria Taylor as like the same kind of analyst. I didn't think of them as pitted against one another. Nichols does a lot of good. It's not like bad, but it's like a lot of fluff, right? And it's a lot of like this is a lot of stories around the league. And Maria Taylor is like a former player. She's a college basketball player that like knows the X's and O's and can talk about drop coverages and those like at very different. I didn't think that they had to compete together, and so that there's that angle that ESPN is potentially making them compete against one another. There's all the verbiage being very hurtful from Nichols and the agents talking on the phone. There's also this idea of like has the privacy of her own condo, apartment, hotel room like violated. There's lots of angles to go with this thing.
Yeah, it's also like sorry, like it's one thing that like really stood out was like I understand she was like Rachel Nichols had like worked her ass off to get where she gets, but like having like the last name Nichols of the family she married into definitely like helped a little bit. So like like everything Maria Taylor has gone through is like Rachel Nichols does not like to hold a candle to that.
Yeah, I told Parker beforehand. I'm like, perfect timing for Rachel because it came over 4th of July weekend. I didn't even know what you guys were talking about when you texted this morning, so I had to like look it up. And she's still doing the jump this week, which I found like I was like, oh, I watched the jump the other day getting ready for the finals and like didn't think anything was wrong. I guess I watched just YouTube clips, so I don't know if anything was talked about. But to your point, Parker. Yeah, Rachel Nichols is more to me like the player interview, more like the jump, more like the when I say player interview, I'm like sit down interview, less than like the sideline. So like I guess I thought there was plenty of space there. I never looked at that as really like a big competition, kind of like what you were saying.
It's interesting because it's probably not great back to the first avenue to go down this that ESPN potentially is like making these two women compete at some level for a gig. Like if the quotes had not been said and it was just like Rachel was angry, I would almost kind of get being angry. But then the quote comes out, ooh, that's you can't that's not good to say, right? You can't say that someone got their job because that like Maria Taylor's worked really hard and she's really good at this. Like that's why she got the gig. that might not be why they took the gig, but that's why she got the gig, is she's good enough for that job. Anyway,
even if like she kind of thought that was why, which is like we said, BS. Like, how dumb are you to actually like throw out that quote? Like, how do you know? Like, you have to know. I feel like, come on, people, like you've been traded. Like you have to know that that's not going to go over well.
Well, it's like I'm sorry. It's like the self-inflicted wounds of ESPN on this. Like, you know, I can only, like, for a company that like essentially makes a lot of their money off of like highlights and games featuring African Americans, and then having a lot of African American employees. Like, I understand like the people that like in that story to the Times were saying like we feel ESPN is saying one thing and then doing a different thing behind the scenes. Like this, you've had this video for a year. Like this is not like it broke over July 4th in a bigger way because of the expose, but like Deadspin had this like over almost a year ago. Like, what are you doing? Like, how is this like? How wasn't this like squashed
completely?
Like I would be so livid.
There's why hasn't anything on this happened in a year if this video was sent to ESPN a year ago? The only person that's been significantly punished was the producer that like sent it to Maria. There's also this weird timing element. So like, for, behind the curtain for people that are not like writing these stories, like you talk to people know this is coming out on July 4th, right? Like 3 or 4 days earlier, the New York Post did a whole article about how like Maria Taylor is going to leave ESPN because she wants Stephen A. Smith money. That doesn't look like it's going to work out. And it was really like conjecture that she could leave. I guess she could re-sign a contract for less than Stephen A. Smith money, but it sounds like she wants a lot of money. Ball's in her court now, right? Like if she leaves ESPN, it looks real bad on ESPN's part. Like the back and forth there between New York Post, New York Times, interesting.
And just to make ESPN look bad, like Fox has kind of had a theme of going and picking these people up that felt disrespected at ESPN and signing them and just trying to look like the good guy network. Because I think a lot of people are getting pretty sick of ESPN. I don't watch a lot of ESPN anymore.
I was going to say, I think ESPN changed a lot we're going to go behind the scenes on ESPN. When Skipper left, right? Like Jamel Hill leaves, Michael Smith leaves, Bomani's still there. But like people of color have kind of been like leaving ESPN slowly. They've replaced them. I don't mean to say they haven't, but like there's a weird ickiness feeling since Skipper left a couple years back of people just kind of trickling out. The Jamel Hill tweet being the big moment a couple years back, right? But it's definitely, the story does shed light on like this icky side of that industry.
Yeah, and too, like she can kind of have a pick of litter too. It's not just Fox anymore. Like Amazon will have a lot more football.
Yeah,
NBC there.
There's a lot more media spaces.
Yeah, CBS, and like going back to that producer who was suspended, like it's such a bad look that the only person to be punished in the story. I mean, like Rachel did, like they did cancel The Jump yesterday for an afternoon, which seems like like not even a slap on the wrist, like a slap on a pinky. But like, the only person to get in trouble so far is a producer who is African American, and like because like you have to cater now to Rachel Nichols, and she can't be on, like you can't have her with Maria. You're taking time away from Malika Andrews. You're taking time away from Cassidy Hubbard. Like this past year, like it'll change now during finals coverage, but it's just the mismanagement is mind-boggling.
It's gonna look really weird when Maria Taylor's hosted the NBA countdown show with ABC. Well, a year that ABC gets the finals for the first couple games, and then her contract ends in the middle of it, and she doesn't re-sign. Like they got to throw the whole bag at her just for the optics of the next 2 weeks, right?
Well,
like
part of Rachel Nichols' appeal too to like ESPN is her relationship with players and the fact that they're willing to do kind of those sit-down interviews where they might not with different people. I mean, from what I've seen, I feel like the players really respond to Rachel Nichols and like her. It'll be interesting to see if she still has that relationship with guys, or if Dame Lillard or just random, but like guys like that are like, I don't really know if I want to sit down with Rachel Nichols and talk about what I'm going to do this offseason and stuff like that. And if she doesn't have that, it kind of takes away from, I think, kind of what she brings to the table.
That's an awesome point. Also, like on a side note, like as awesome as Chris Paul has been this playoffs, I think like his biggest accomplishment over the last like 10 days is beginning with the word bag into the lexicon more. Like, since he had that post-game interview with Aiden, I have heard so many people using the term bag. It is so wild. Like Bill Simmons used it, and he sounded like very awkwardly white when he did. So it was like,
well, to be fair, Bill Simmons is awkwardly white sometimes.
I was gonna say, that's the brand right there.
Yeah, he plays to his strengths.
Well, diving into Chris Paul does get us into actually talking about basketball last night, because while that was a big story, we're also in the NBA Finals. As weird as it feels to be on July 7th, Game 1 happened last night, July 6th. We're in the NBA Finals. The Olympics are a couple weeks away, and we got Chris Paul, and we got a lot of actual basketball to talk about, not just ESPN's coverage of the National Basketball Association. So as I dive in, our segment here we do at the midweek mid-range is called Hot Tea, Cold Brew. And we do that because we're brought to you by Yeti Coolers. Hot Tea, Cold Brew is brought to you by Yeti Coolers, Cups, and Koozies. Yeti's the go-to shop for keeping things hot or cold, just like these NBA stories and the NBA Finals. Yeti's based out of Austin, Texas. Please check out the links in our social media handles for all your insulated needs for tailgating, camping, and daily life. Yeti is built for the wild. Now, we're going to go through some different topics or headlines of sorts, and we'll talk about if they're hot, like there's something to them, or cold, I don't know if that's such a big deal. Again, this goes back to I think it's old at this point because I'm fairly old, but the Kermit the Frog meme, right? He's sipping hot tea or whatever. And as we watched last night's game, I think the big story going into the game was Giannis Antetokounmpo's out. And then it was Giannis Antetokounmpo is doubtful. And then it was he's probable. And then the graphic shows up before the game tips off, and he's in the starting lineup, right? And so I'll start with JD, honestly, because you got his jersey on right there. Hot tea, cold brew. Giannis is back, but he's clearly not himself.
So this one's tough just based on kind of the wording. I'll go hot tea in the fact that he's not 100%, but when you say he's clearly not himself, it almost implies he was a shell of himself. Kind of that more reminds me of how James Harden was kind of at the end of that series, where it's James Harden is not James Harden. I think Giannis is not 100%, but I think he played better than any of us thought. So at least me, he looked more like himself than I thought. I would say he's probably at 75% right now. He was aggressive early, but that kind of backed down a little bit. I think defensively, he had that one really big block. He was able to rebound, but I don't know if defensively he was clearly himself, at least on a perimeter defending kind of level. So I'll go hot tea on it based on the fact that he's not his 100% self, but I don't think he's played like a shell of himself, and I think it's good news that he played well at all.
He finished with 20 points and 17 boards. Again, not that counting stats or everything, but in a normal situation, no one would really blink at that. However, the NBA Finals, him getting 20 and 17, they probably would have, even if it was a couple less rebounds, they might have won a few more points out of him, especially in a loss. Chris, statistics aside, you watched the game last night. How do you feel like Giannis moved? Is Giannis back, or is he not really back?
He's definitely not back, but he definitely surpassed my expectations. The boards, obviously, said, go away from stats, but getting those boards really helped, especially to neutralize what Aiden was doing with all of his rebounds. Having somebody that can go toe for toe with him against, I think definitely helped. The way I kind of looked at last night was if you could get Giannis into the game and knock off the rust and just start to get into the flow of a game again, it's a win. For me, last night's game had nothing to do with Giannis, not being himself. I think anything he gave you was crazy last night. Everyone overreacts to game ones of series. We've seen it this whole playoffs. Just look at any Clippers run around this year. But for me, it was okay, let's get Giannis involved. Let's see what the Suns are doing, and let's reevaluate there. For me, the two biggest issues last night had nothing to do with Giannis. It was one, the pick and roll defense, and then Holiday. So hopefully, Giannis, he played 35 minutes. Hopefully they can get up to 40 in the next game, and he can kind of, start to be himself. It's going to be on, I think, the people. He's one of the things I have no concerns about at the moment. I think he's going to be okay. The Bucks, though, I'd be worried about some other things.
One, and I will say, and we'll get into some of the other things soon, I promise. I think that it's interesting to say that, truthfully, 2017 last night, 35 minutes is not a bad night. And if they turn around and win game 2, they split. That's all the job. You're trying to split on the road, right? And so, they split. It doesn't really matter. I will say that it makes me feel I've been weary of because this year's had so many injuries. Every time you hear of an injury, it's just a slight hamstring thing, I'm that's grade 2. anytime. And when they said it's a hyperextended knee, I was like, that thing's torn. Like I was really skeptical because no one wants to say and give that, part of the game away. No one wants to say what's actually happening. And to see him moving around so well in warmups and then putting those starting lineup, clearly that he really was just hyperextended. It looks so much worse than that. But I think the impact you'll see more is in reactionary movements, like JD said, on defense, as far as like playing along the perimeter and those kinds of things. Whereas on offense, when he's in control, he clearly went to the left baseline for a couple dunks, and he had one almost big dunk across the middle of the lane. Like when he's in control of his movements, it's different than when he's trying to react to the guy in front of him. I don't know. I hope he's back because I'd hate for it to be like he's so sore today he can't go tomorrow or something like that. But no reports on that yet. So
yeah, he's probably the most likable or one of the most likable players in the NBA. And like even though I still have after 7 years of him in my life have trouble pronouncing his last name, the fact that he has stood so strong to Milwaukee, I want to whether the Bucks win this or not, you have two people I think a lot of people are rooting for, because in my research this is also Chris Paul's first final in his 16 years career apparently, but you kind of want him to have a good finals at the minimum if the Bucks are not going to win.
Well, and he's 26, so
right.
Unlike Chris Paul, I don't think this is his only chance. I will say though that he's become the kid that you can't pronounce his last name to the guy like Cher that only has one name, right? When you say Giannis, we all know who we're talking about.
Right.
We talk about him playing, and we mentioned his perimeter defense. Interestingly enough, they went away in their starting lineup. They have him, they have PJ, they have Brook Lopez, a really big lineup, and he is a perimeter player. Last night, it felt like they played a lot of minutes with him not as that perimeter guy. They went with a really small lineup. I thought it was interesting in doing research after the game. I was like, man, I don't feel like I saw that core five out there a lot. They played their starting lineup less than 9 total minutes. The starting lineup being PJ, Brook, Giannis, and then Drew and Middleton at the 2 guard spots. That lineup played less than 5 minutes on the floor, which feels like not a lot of time. If you're starting that lineup, you think that that's your best, right? Or if it's not, why are you starting it? I guess I would ask. So I'm going to throw it to you, Chris. Hot Too Cold Brew. The Bucks need to play their starting lineup more in the second game.
It's a little bit of a tough question because I think last night we saw Brook Lopez kind of have some issues against Booker and Paul. And I think that's one of the reasons it went to 9 minutes. Now, the issue was taking Brook out and putting Bobby Portis in. So it's oh, well, this is not good. This is not good. It's really kind of like those 10 Jeff Teague minutes aren't great. So, the Bucks kind of have to figure out the switching defense isn't going to work. And right now, it kind of feels like the issues that the Bucks are having all kind of go back to the summer. If they were able to bring Bogdanović in and lock that in, I think that would have made a tighter 5 to go against the Suns. Also, instead of giving up all those picks for Holiday, you kind of go in the other direction and go Paul. And also it's as a Knicks fan, even tanking, watching Bobby Portis is awful. I know he has the one good Bobby Portis game out at 1 out every 7 or 8. They are mirages. He is not a player that should be playing in a first round, let alone NBA Finals.
I always think it's fascinating watching Bobby Portis play because he has that stretch you're talking about where he hits 2 threes and he's 6'10", and you're like, oh my god, this guy had to play every minute, and then he's a turnstile on defense. I think that if you're going to bleed points, you might as well get the threes out of the guy. I will say, I think it's interesting. You talk about they ran some problems in the drop coverage with Brook trying to stay level and not staying level and whatever on the mid range. The Suns, conversely, played their starting lineup for more than 22 minutes, and so I only throw that out to say that clearly one of them felt like their starting lineup played well. And so JD, I throw it back to you, the Bucks fan. Do you want to see more minutes out of the starters, or do you think there's some lineup that needs? Because to be fair to starters, they just played less than 9 minutes. Like that's how much he was changing things up. So what do you think that?
Okay. Sorry. I think first of all, I won't have that Bobby Portis slander. I love me some Bobby Portis. I won't have it. I just like the energy he brings. And I think he is way more effective as a home game because he'll just have that like dive on the ground, hit people around. I like Bobby Portis. But yeah, I'm gonna go cold brew in the fact that I do agree that I think there was a little too much lineup switching in general. Like it didn't seem like there was a group that really got comfortable in there together. The pushback I have on the starting lineup is you kind of hit on it, Chris. Brook Lopez, and he was in the Atlanta series as well. It's just a liability on the pick and roll. And I think this has kind of been the take today I've seen, but I kind of agree that I really do like the Giannis at the 5 look. I think he can defend that pick and roll much better. The big thing for me is I think you just got to keep the kind of big 3 out there. I think you got to have Drew, Chris, and Giannis kind of playing at the same time. And I will say, like, yeah, you said it, that the fact that they were just kind of switching all sorts of kind of lineups throughout. I want them to find kind of that core lineup. This isn't a comparison in the fact of like it's the same lineup, but it kind of takes me back to when the Warriors first started their run and they kind of picked up that small lineup with, Draymond Green in at the 5 and just go on that small ball. And it just kind of unlocked something. But like that was the group. It was like, there's the starters. And then this is the other big, like there's 2 groups that get the big minutes. I think we need to find that second lineup. So I'll go cold brew in the fact that I'm not really broken up about the starters not playing together that much, but I want to have a core group that has kind of a big minutes together.
I'm sorry.
I would say statistically speaking, to your credit, again, this is all from stathead.com. So if it's wrong, don't get mad at me. But the second most minutes for any lineup was Giannis, Connaughton, Forbes, Drew, Chris. And so a very small lineup because Forbes is not very big. Connaughton's not really a 4. No. And they played the second most minutes and were at a +4. They're one of the few lineups that was in the positive on the plus minus.
Giannis was positive himself, I believe, too.
Giannis was, which is interesting in how big a loss that was,
right.
That he played 35 minutes and was positive. And so I guess I will say that if you're looking at Giannis the 5, maybe that lineup, you see something in film this morning, run through a different set in practice this afternoon and roll out with that tomorrow. Chris, I cut you off though. You're going to add something.
Sorry. Yeah. The 2 things, like, from listening to JD, I think like going back to the previous conversation, I wonder, if Giannis isn't 100% too, is he, not having to chase guys around on the perimeter, is he stronger, playing the 5 and beyond Aiden, especially because like the thing that really unlocked the Suns this playoffs, which is just wild, is Aiden. Mm-hmm. And, being like an 8.
Uh-oh, did we lose Chris?
And I think you guys lost me.
Oh, no, yeah.
Hey, good to see you again.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. All right. I think we was talking about is how Ayton unlocks the Suns, right?
Yeah.
And Chris Paul agreed with you in the post.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw that. Chris Paul was 100% agreeing with you.
And then too, like, I didn't want to come on here this morning just because like everyone's going to be killing Brook Lopez today, right? So like it's unfortunate. Like I grew up in the New York, New Jersey area. Like I'm a Knicks fan, but like I really grew up appreciating Brook, and like I love the work that his brother does beating up mascots. But like I was like, okay, well here's the thing. Like if you're Coach Bud, like do you have Brook in the post, and are you just feeding him? Hopefully, because he is so good in the post, to get Aiden in foul trouble. But the thing that's been like so awesome about Aiden this playoffs is he never gets in foul trouble. So like maybe you try that, but like his whole like is Aiden going to bite?
Well, part of Brook Lopez's appeal is the fact that he spreads the floor against a bigger, maybe Aiden's pretty mobile. Don't get me wrong, but like not like a used to playing perimeter 3 defense. Kind of big. He stretches the floor so Giannis can attack. I think we saw that with like Clint Capella last series a little bit, but I don't think at least right now, it keeps coming back to the Giannis health, but I don't know if he is in quite attack mode. We saw it a little bit early. He might have had the adrenaline flowing, but he did not do nearly enough of it off the dribble in the second half. And that might have to do with his health. But if Giannis isn't kind of in attack mode, then Brook Lopez doesn't help as much stretching the floor. And yeah, he's good in the post, but then if we're doing that kind of what Chris had to say with Giannis being less mobile, being down low, and he can just kind of fight for rebounds and play the five that way instead of more perimeter defense. But I think the problem is Brook, his strengths aren't really on display right now because of the Giannis injury.
Well, and his strengths kind of tie me into my next prompt, weirdly enough. So Milwaukee ran a drop defense with him in the game because he's not as mobile along the perimeter, right? And so that means that when the guy's coming off the pick and roll, he's dropping and he's trying to, cut off a layup, but also recover to his man. He's got a chaser going on the backside, right? That doesn't really work against Devin Booker and Chris Paul because they're lethal from the mid-range. So, you're retreating too far, they're just going to pull up right over the top, right? That didn't work very well. They resorted to cut off those mid-range shots, a switching defense, which I would argue also did not work very well. There was still plenty of penetration off the switch to get drive and kick, and the Suns hit their shots, and sometimes it's that simple. And so my hot tea, cold brew question to you, JD, is hot tea or cold brew, the Suns proved why that Milwaukee switching defense is not going to work. Is that a one-night kind of thing, or is that a trend that Milwaukee's going to have to adjust to at some point?
So you're not wrong about anything you said. I'm going to go cold brew just on the fact of I think it has a lot to do with lineups, like we just talked about, more than, the personnel you're putting kind of Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, kind of those guys kind of in bad situations. But I'll go cold brew more of the fact of, I think you said at the beginning of the show, let's not overreact to game ones. You're the best defensive team statistically in the league in the regular season. You've been one of the best. I think maybe, I don't know. I haven't looked at I don't know how they do that, but I think they either were the best. Oh, lost Chris. They've either been the best or one of the best defensive teams in the playoffs, except for every once in a while they'll have these big, bad defensive games. They'll let up a couple but they're kind of few and far between. So I'm going to go cold brew just in the fact of I don't want to overreact. We're a good defensive team. We've been a good defensive team. Now, part of being a good defensive team, to your point, is making some adjustments. And I think that comes more with the lineup than the switching. Because I also I don't know what you're going to do if you don't switch, because that is kind of their bread and butter. And then the one other point just on defense, a little different than this question, but is defense. I would like to see Drew Holiday, I believe 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. I want to see him guard Chris Paul. I want to see him more actively involved in the defensive game plan more than he has been. I think you got to utilize that, especially if he's not scoring.
Fascinating that, at least in the starting lineup, they started with Tucker on Paul and put Drew on Booker. I don't know if that's because they think that Tucker's a much bigger, longer guy or what. I do want to throw it back to you, Chris. Though we talked about is the issues that Milwaukee had with switching defense last night. Was that a one-night thing? I mean, the Suns had 4 guys shoot over 40% from 3 on a lot of kickouts. Is that a one-night kind of problem and shooting regress to the norm, or is that really a problem that they're going to have to deal with and adjust their strategy?
I think it's going to be a problem they have to deal with if Brook and Portis are man the 5. If Giannis is at the 5 and he gets a little healthier game by game, I think it will be better. But Bud obviously, everyone on NBA Twitter gives him shit all the time because he doesn't switch things up. He actually felt like he was trying a couple different things last night. So I thought that, and seeing the starters, I appreciated that. Seeing Middleton and Holiday play over 40 minutes each. I thought that was different than he would normally. It seems like he's checked in and engaged in a way to start a game one that you haven't seen him do it in previous series. So it'll be interesting. I think they have this season, they kind of have a mandate of we are going to try different things in the regular season. So when we get to the playoffs and have these moments, we have other tools in our bag other than the switching. So hopefully in game 2, Bud will continue to not wait and have urgency and try to try something else out. I think, to JD's point, I think having Holiday on Paul, I like better just because I feel, we saw what Paul did in that, third quarter last night. Like if Chris Paul's having a 16-point quarter, you're probably going to lose the game. But more importantly, like he is the maestro of that offense. Like he is the one conducting it. If you make his life harder, like I think the rest, like you're cutting the head off the snake essentially. Like it's a hydra. So so I think that can kind of mess up Phoenix's flow at least here and there in a better way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know with how well those two guards, and I guess Payne does as well, but how well Paul and Booker both shoot in the mid-range, you do have to give up something. There is no perfect coverage, right? And so I don't know what the answer there is. I thought it was fascinating, and this is not actually on the docket here, so pardon me for going off book a second, but a lot of the pick and roll defense out of Phoenix was if there was Giannis, when Giannis is a big on him, he typically becomes a screener, and he goes to the screener with Middleton or Drew. And the opposite corner is Pat Connaughton. It felt like Phoenix was just okay with Pat Connaughton shooting, they just like completely abandoned him to protect the rim so they could play it with two people, which is fascinating because Connaughton's not a bad shooter. Right? He's not a guy that he shot 50% last night, 2 of 4 from three. I guess 3 of 6 from the field, but 2 of 4 from three, and they're leaving him open in the corner. And I didn't feel like that was exploitable enough. Again, that's the kind of thing that Bud showed throughout the regular season this year. He looks like he's grown as a coach. Maybe it's the kind of thing they're explaining a little bit more tomorrow. It was just interesting to see happen.
I think that's a smart way to go about it too. I mean, if I was them, I'd be more comfortable with Pat shooting than putting that pressure on and just making Middleton uncomfortable. I mean, Middleton's a volume shooter, but he shot a lot yesterday and an okay percentage. And then obviously Drew Holiday didn't play up to snuff, but I'll get more into Pat Connaughton in our next segment. We'll have a thing, but
the next segment, the next hot tea cold brew topic is after game one, we know who the Suns finals MVP will be. Now, I think that the consensus here after last night's game would be Paul. Paul did finish with 32, 9, and I thought, 4 rebounds. Sorry, I thought it was a handful of rebounds too. That's a lot considering he didn't have to play a lot of the fourth quarter, right? He tapped out at about 37 minutes, and the game was it got as close as 9, but for a lot of the fourth, it was over 15. And I guess it finished at 13. Chris, I'm going to throw it to you. Let's say this thing finishes out. Suns in full, right? Whatever the GIF is. Is Chris Paul the Suns MVP, or was last night that, and it's going to switch to Booker? Is it going to be what's happening there?
I think no matter what happens, whether this is a 4-game sweep for the Suns or it goes 7, I think Chris Paul is going to win MVP, and even if it's not merit based. So, the dude has a lot of friends in the media. He has been in our lives for almost close to 2 decades. Everyone has forgotten the nut punch in college because everyone likes him so much and because of Cliff Paul. So I think he has this wrapped up. Even if Booker goes off or Aiden, kind of becomes Will Chamberlain, or Bridges just shuts Giannis down for 3 straight games.
I'll throw it to you, JD. Do you also think that this is kind of his to lose, or is it?
Well,
you got more open than that.
You guys are both bloggers, right? You already have the Chris Paul MVP story wrote, right? That's what I assume most the writers out there already have that in. I'll go cold brew just on the fact of the way it's worded. The question is, do we know who the Suns finals MVP will be after game 1? And knowing the fact that it's not like Booker had 12 points. Booker played really well, as well as we've seen this out of Booker. If he has a 55, what if he has a historic 55-point playoff game or something like that? And this also implies that they're going to win, which they're not. But Booker, I think Booker, his talent is there to the point where he has back-to-back 40-point performances or something like that, where it's just how can you not? just based on the potential that Booker has at any time. I will say we don't know for sure, but I will say I think your point is that's what the media wants. That's probably where it's going to vote. If it's close, it won't be close in the fact that, like, if it's close, everyone's going Chris Paul. He's definitely the leader in the clubhouse right now, but I wouldn't say that he is the for sure after game one finals MVP just because Booker did play well and Booker has a potential to do like some Devin Booker stuff that is like, oh my God, we've never seen that before. And then it's hard to not give it to him. So
right. I will say LeBron's made his choice. He said 1 down, 3 to go at CP3. So I think LeBron knows who he wants. And the league typically runs on LeBron, right? For whatever that reason that is.
Hey, fun stuff for a second. Like, did you guys hear those Chris Paul comments about the schedule this year?
No, I did not.
Early on?
Yeah, like before game one during the media stuff.
Was he on the LeBron side of it?
He was on the opposite, and it felt like he was throwing some shade at Bron, which
good.
I wonder if there's some.
I hate that stuff. The schedule talk or the injury. It's like, yeah, injuries happen, but like if you look at like the way these injuries have happened, I don't buy that it's a fatigue thing. But
apparently, also too, like, you know, from what some NBA execs have said, like there's only been like 15 practices this year, which is lower than obviously normal in a league that doesn't practice much. And like, you know, like JD Paul essentially said, like, everyone had time to make their points clear about the schedule if anyone had an issue with it, which seemed like a shot across the bow at LeBron.
Kyrie only played like 3 games, and he got hurt. So
yeah, I think it's fascinating to look at the schedule and injuries because, like, I don't know, I like it feels like something weird is in the water because there's so many.
Yeah.
And I think that's the easy go-to with it, and it certainly is the different. Like if you're looking at like what made this year different versus previous years, like that is a difference. There's a different amount, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a guy that's an asterisk guy though. My other show, F in Sports, my co-host was like big on, and I anti-asterisk. There's, you know, last season there was a bubble, doesn't need asterisk. The year before, Durant and Klay Thompson gets hurt, doesn't need asterisk. The year before, Chris Paul gets hurt, doesn't need an asterisk. The year before, there's the salary cap spike, so Durant signs, doesn't need an asterisk. The Draymond Green suspension in 2016, like all those different, like you could do this every single year. I'm not that guy.
I had a buddy who said, "Oh, like, you know, you're going to beat Brooklyn or whatever, but you know, no one's going to give you credit for that." And I'm like, we built our team based on the one all-star in-depth system. They built their team on 3 injury-prone dudes in the playoffs. Like, I obviously don't root for injuries or anything like that, but I'm taking credit for beating that team because we constructed ours different. And Kyrie's now been hurt on 3 separate teams in the playoffs, his last 3 teams. That's just it sucks, but like that is a part of the equation, if you will. So like,
and Kyrie's not very old to have that happened either. Like it's not like he's some like old veteran.
It's not like, oh, this is the first time this guy's gotten hurt. Like if LeBron got hurt in the playoffs, like out for the series, it'd be like, ooh, that's tough because that doesn't happen. It's like you built your team knowing this. Like your big 3. I agree. That's kind of goes to your asterisk point.
I'm not a big asterisk guy. Chris,
I'm actually the opposite, where it's like, you know, I feel this finals and like the last finals, like if anything, I'll put an asterisk. Like these were harder. Like we saw what happened last year in the bubble. Like there are some teams that like everyone's going through so much weird shit. Like everyone was like isolated. Those players were away from their family for 3 or 4 months, like living like stuck in Disney World with Dwight Howard. Like that's horrible. And like this is like this year too. Like it's like. I jokes aside, like I brought up the point just because I love the cattiness between Paul and LeBron, because like the LeBron being out of the spotlight narrative, you know, like you can tell like he's thirsting for it, even though like Space Jam's coming out like soon. But like, you know, I do think the condensed schedule and like coming back from the NBA season so quickly definitely played a role. With that being said, I think it's more impressive for teams to like kind of get through it and keep like to be in this moment. Like, you know, the Suns were in the bubble last year. They had a quick turnaround too. Bucks went to the second round in the bubble. They had a quick turnaround too. Like it's impressive that they're here. It's impressive that they're
depth and youth is a part of how you build a team, and if that worked out in the bubble, then you say all that, then you had the most experienced team win it. So like, yeah, I agree. I'm firmly on the bubble counts just as much, if not maybe more impressive.
we're talking about, results of finals. The last hot tea cold brew section, the topic I should say, is kind of looking at this final as a whole. Now, this show always comes out on Wednesdays, and so we didn't get to preview the finals, but we do get to review game one and talk about what we hope is 6 more games of great basketball. Hot tea cold brew topic, I'll throw it to Chris. Game one is indicative enough the Phoenix Suns will win the NBA Finals. What do you think about that?
Yes. No, I was just trying to message JD. I think it's really going to depend on Giannis, and it's going to depend where you can get like those extra games from. Like, who on the Bucks roster? Like, can you get obviously I was throwing some shade at Jeff Teague earlier, but like, can you get good minutes out of him? Can you find a game here? And like the 3 Bucks stars, like if you're going to win the series, like all of them have to play well. Like Holiday, like he played great against the Hawks, but like you brought in this guy, you gave up 4 picks for him. Like, maybe he's not a number 2, maybe he's more of a 3 star, maybe it's less, but like if you are going to win the series, he has to, one, you can't shut down Chris Paul, like, but you can make his life more difficult. He has to do that. And then 2, he has to be more efficient and get buckets. Like, he doesn't have to have 30 points a game, but like I think those guys combined, the big 3 of Milwaukee, have to have 3. And I think like you have to let like Middleton, even if Middleton's kind of like, unlike Holiday, like if he is not scoring, he is at least like, you have to always cover him because he will always hit an open shot. So even if he has an inefficient game, though he's played well the last couple of games together, like you always have to account for him. It's not the same.
It's no fun guarding Chris Middleton because you're going to be running. You're going to be running the whole game. He's just constantly not quite Steph Curry, but like kind of that idea. He's always kind of moving.
Well, and also not like Steph Curry, but in a similar vein, he does make you cover him at all. He played 44 minutes. You have to cover him all 44 minutes, right? You can't leave him to go double, help, whatever, for whatever reason. Like he's going to be covered. That occupies the defense differently. JD, I want to throw it to you too, because I do want to hear if you think last night was indicative of what's going to happen in this series. I'm assuming your fandom is at least going to say no. I don't know what your head's going to say. I think I know what your heart's going to say. But Chris brought up Drew Holiday needing to play better. He shot 4-14 last night for 28% from the field. That's the lowest of anyone who got minutes last night for the Bucks. Although it was more attempts than a lot of other guys, it was the lowest percentage. He's known more as a defender, but we talked about how great Devin Booker and Chris Paul played. So at least individually, he got switched off of that or whatever the case may be there, right? And so I throw it to you, JD. Is Drew Holiday going to dictate this series? Is game one going to show how the series is going? Or what do you think about the series after last night?
Yeah, I think we talked about it earlier when I said he should guard Chris Paul. It's like, if you're not going to contribute on offense, you have to do defense. That's your thing. So yeah, exactly to your point there. This brew's so cold that it's a frozen iced coffee. Okay. No, obviously my heart is, the Bucks are going to win, but I actually do believe the Bucks still can win this series. I would say I still is going to win this series. And based on the kind of the way the question is here, is game one indicative? No, just based on the fact that I think the Bucks, like I woke up this morning like, if you would have told me Drew Holiday played terrible, which he really did, he didn't play well. Chris Middleton kind of had a high volume shooting, but like 29 points on, I think it was like 29 shots or something like that. But the big news is Giannis played. Giannis gave good minutes. He was positive. I think the plus minus, he was positive when he was on the floor, which is really, really big for us. And he's only going to get more healthy, get better, play more minutes. And I just don't think Drew Holiday is going to play this bad. I think he's going to give you offense. You have 10 points. It's just not realistic. That was okay when Giannis was scoring 35. It might take a little bit to get Giannis back to that level. So they got to pick up the slack. I just believe in this team. We've lost now 3 of our 4 game ones. So, it's kind of par for the course here. We came out with good energy, which is better than I think a lot of the Hawks games was. The first quarter was always kind of brutal. We were kind of fighting from behind. The being down 20 in the fourth and not quitting based on, you could have easily put Giannis back on the bench and just kind of called it quits. No, I don't think game one is indicative of what's going to come the rest of the series. Do I think the Bucks are going to win? I will say yes. I'm definitely not as confident, but I take that back. I might be even more confident just based on the way that, like, I didn't think Giannis was going to play. I definitely didn't think he was going to give solid minutes. I'll go cold brew on the fact that game one, at least, if the Bucks lose, that's fine. But I don't think the series will be like game one. I don't think game one is what's to come, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, so I guess my question there would be, obviously it's on the road, and that's part of it. Obviously it's Giannis' first game back. There's some of that too. But is there a big adjustment you see coming then, JD, to flip it back? Or is it
Giannis at the 5?
So more of those kind of smaller
lineups. No, definitely. Giannis at the 5. Defensively, I think will help a lot. And the big adjustment is one of Drew Holiday or Chris Middleton in every kind of game of the series. One of them has played big. I don't think either of them played overly well. Now, I know Chris Middleton had 29 points, but I don't think Chris Middleton was kind of take over the game. Chris Middleton, that usually he will step up and be, at least in these playoffs, when Giannis takes a backseat, when Drew takes a backseat. I expect better play from both those guys, and I think Giannis is only going to get stronger and stronger. So I guess that's my big takeaway is I just don't see Drew Holiday. You said it kind of runs through Drew Holiday. I think you're right. I think there's no way we get worse Giannis and worse Drew, knock on wood. I can't wait for both of them to have like 2 for 20 games, and everyone can tweet this. But I don't see them. I think they played bad. Like, I know that sounds kind of crazy because it's like in some ways they didn't, but I don't think they played their best game, and I think they will. I think they will because they haven't played their best game in game ones.
My concern about that is I think the one thing about last night that, to give a contradictory point is like, up until last night, the Bucks had been shooting 31% from three the whole playoffs. They had a really good game from behind three, probably the best one that they're going to have in this series. So I think I don't think you can count on that going into it, but I think to your point, like if you play, I want to see what happens if you play Giannis at the 5 and keep Drew on Paul. I think my hope is it's kind of like Celtics against the Lakers in the finals, because Booker, does kind of have a little bit of Mamba in him, and he grew up idolizing Kobe. Like if Giannis can make Aiden's life more difficult, and Drew can, make Paul's life more difficult, does Booker then play hero ball with his, especially now that he has his own water bottle. So.
and we've seen inconsistency from the Suns this playoffs too. I think the Suns played about as good as this was a perfect game for the Suns. That's 100%. Another big takeaway. I mean, Booker and Paul just worked together like, peanut butter and jelly. I mean, they were really, really good together. They're a little more inconsistent, have some youth on that team. So I'm hoping some experience, and I don't think the Bucks will dip in as much as I think the Suns will dip at times through the series. Maybe not. Maybe this is if they don't, then it'll be well deserved. But this is kind of what they've done.
Yeah. So Booker, interesting looking at the team, obviously, because everyone's talking about how great Chris Paul played. Chris brought up how well DeAndre Ayton's fit into his role on that team. I would argue that Mikal Bridges is playing very well on the perimeter and defensive end as well, with a guy like Middleton or whatever. Devin Booker actually didn't shoot the ball very well, but got to the line 10 times. And so he covered up for it. Right. And I wonder if, in a later game, you may get him shooting the ball well, but he might not get to the line 10 times. Right. Like, he's a young player. The
free throw difference was huge too. Not to cut you off, but I think Giannis was the only one to get to the line in the first half. So,
if the Suns go up 2-0, the Bucks are definitely going to have the advantage from the line in game 3. So.
Well, the question though, I guess, is do they want it with the way Giannis shoots the free throw? No. I will say, not only did they get to the line more, the Suns only missed one of their 26 free throws last night as a team, right? And so, like they also shot the ball well once they got there.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. My big adjustment, I think, if Milwaukee wants to win this series, I think they also need to find some way to keep Giannis more around the rim defensively, whether he's actually hot or not. I wonder if the lineup is. I like Bryn Forbes. It's finding the right puzzle piece, whether it's Chris hates him, but whether it's Portis or Tucker or Connaughton or whoever that, because then you got Middleton and you got Drew, and then I like Forbes, and then however you go along that way. I don't know if and when they figure it out. I will say that if they split the first two games, we're all going to look like idiots for picking the Suns. Or those of us that are. Anyway, we're going to jump into our next
everybody.
Our next segment now, called the long two. Now, again, a mid-range jump shot is a long two-pointer. Some analytics nerds hate it because if you just take a step backwards, it's worth another point. So it's worth 2/3 the points versus the shot right behind it. It's about the same percentage, but the long two is our game here at the midweek mid-range. And my question for each of you, and I'll start with you, JD, is two non-starters that you see after watching game one play out, and assuming the starting lineup stay the same, I should say, two non-starters that you think will have the biggest impact this series are.
Yeah. So I'll pick one from each team. Just not showing.
Did we lose you, JD? How about this? Chris, can you hear me? I'm throwing it to you, Chris. What are your two non-starters you see making the biggest impact?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, campaign's probably like the simple answer for the Suns, but, I've always liked Torrey Craig a lot. I think he really is like the perfect bench player. So, not to get like the easy campaign answer, I'll go Torrey Craig just because he does a little bit of everything well. He's like a jack of all trades, master of none, and fits in the flow of an offense, fits in the flow of a defense really strong. And then, I guess Connaughton for the Bucks, like you heard my thoughts on the Bucks roster, but I think like I kind of feel that like as this series approaches and like Giannis gets a little healthier, we're going to be seeing a lot of 40-minute games from the starters, especially Tucker, Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday. If like those guys, I think like there are going to be nights where like the lowest out of that total is going to be 42 minutes, 44 minutes. So we'll see.
Gotcha. I think it's interesting. So Connaughton's weird because I do think he got a lot of run last night in those smaller lineups. I don't know if he's necessarily my solution, but he's certainly the one Bud went with. And again, he had the lineups with him had a decent plus-minus rating. JD, now that you're back, you got cut off with technology there for a second. Talk to me about who are your two non-starters you see making a big impact.
Yeah, I think I started with Cam Johnson. He came in, and I thought he brought just a good kind of defensive energy. If Giannis isn't 100%, he seemed to want to get physical with him. Obviously, no one's trying to hurt anybody or anything like that. But if a guy, someone's got, something going, they can't move as fast, you're going to be more physical. He's a guy that he can come in and if he needs to, hack Giannis because he's not a starter. His fouls are a little less valuable than Bridges or someone like that. So I just think he can kind of be an X factor a little bit when he comes in, maybe guarding Giannis. Depends if they switch up the lineups, maybe not. The one for the Bucks, it sounded like you guys were kind of getting into it. Sorry, not a lot of different takes here, but I was going to say Pat Connaughton as well. Like you said, they gave him the open shots. Yeah, he was 50% from the field, not terrible, but in 28 minutes, which is by far the most off the bench for any Bucks player, only 8 points. I think you're going to have him, score 15 or or 14 or 15 points or something like that, giving minutes like that. If he can give you that, if they're going to leave him open, he's just got to hit the shots. It'll be interesting with that small lineup if someone like Forbes or someone like that gets more minutes. Based on who gets it's kind of a cop out, but based on who gets the minutes, I mean, that person's just going to be more important if they're going to hit their shots or not. I don't want Pat Connaughton. You said they're kind of leaving him open. I don't want him to turn into the Harrison Barnes, getting his head, leave him wide open. Like, no one, we're just not going to guard him, and he's going to go 2 for 10 from 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think make him respect you a little bit there, Pat, and I think that would go a long way. I think he's actually pretty important to this series.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, Campaign, right? He had some big
Campaign was
we mentioned Connaughton. And then the guy that I think could go, his bench minutes will be big for either team is actually Chris's guy, Bobby Portis. Because if he's going to get 14 to 16 minutes a game, and if he is a positive, that's big for Milwaukee. That's a big win, right? Yeah. Because he can help the offense. If he can like limit someone else on defense or just be in the way, that's a big positive for them. Conversely, if I'm Chris Paul or Devin Booker, and one of those guys should be on the floor at all times, and I see Bobby Portis in the game, spring right here, I'm calling it right now, and I'm going off that guy, right? And so, Bobby Portis, to me, I think, I don't actually know which team I would argue he helps more, but based on how his, again, 15-ish minutes go, could really shape the series.
He's going to influence the game. Which way, who knows?
Weirdly. And then I also really like Torrey Craig. I don't know. Craig is, first of all, if you're tuning in basketball, he started the year off with Milwaukee, and so he's currently actually going to get a ring, right? Like he played enough games for both
teams. The Anderson Bears show.
Yeah, he gets a ring no matter what happens here. Obviously, he'd like to, as a current Suns player, be on the team that actually wins at the end of it.
His heart's in Milwaukee. He wants to.
But I think his toughness and whatever cliches you want to throw at that are important, right? Those kinds of minutes out of him. Again, he got 15 last night. He's really more like a 12-minute kind of guy. Last night they were just winning by a lot, and so he got a little bit more. Yeah. I think his toughness and like the putbacks and those kind of things will be big. And
Bobby Portis up there.
the inverse of Bobby Portis. As we sit here on Wednesday, right? We played game 1 last night. And we're at this part of the year where there's actually not NBA basketball games every night. And so, obviously this recorded shows on a Wednesday. People go about the rest of their day and enjoy what they want to watch on a Wednesday night. But it's not going to be NBA basketball. And so my open container question to you guys, again, open container like a Yeti. Once you take the top off and then go in and out. Now that there is a day off between NBA games, like there is going to be, there's no question about whether or not there will be. Your favorite thing to watch on a day without NBA basketball is what? Let's start with Chris.
Well, because Wednesday, I'll probably watch Loki. Finish that one out. I know the episode dropped, so I'm waiting for when my girlfriend is done with work today, we'll probably pop that on and see about that. I love Rick and Morty, so that's always a good watch if there's nothing new. So I'm actually this playoffs has been such a weird playoffs where I am glad to have a night just to watch TV and chill on the couch. Yeah, it
has been all consuming because they've been so crammed together.
Well, even today, you look at there's a non-NBA, it's a non-game day, but these DeMar DeRozan to the Laker rumors are taking everything up. Where it's just Adam Silver has done an amazing job of making us a 24/7, 365, day year sport.
Completely. JD, talk to us. What are you watching on an off day? Is it Loki? Is it other sports? What are you watching these days?
Yeah, Chris kind of took mine right off the bat there. Yeah, no, I'm a huge kind of movie nerd. I love the MCU stuff, so I'll definitely be watching Loki. I will have to watch that tonight. I have to stay off Twitter, stay off all the spoilers. Wednesdays, that's my favorite TV day. So Dave comes out today. I don't know if anyone watches that. I love Dave on FX. The little Dicky show is good. But other than that, just to throw a little something different, I'll probably hop on YouTube. I am my favorite thing in the world, right in front of Milwaukee Bucks basketball is Ohio State football. So I'm going to be YouTubing. We just got a big time 5-star recruit. I'm going to have to check him out. See what people are saying. Listen to a couple Buckeye football.
He's a defensive end that is also going to play basketball for the Buckeyes.
He's going to try. He's going to try. He's going to walk on the basketball team.
He's 6'7", 270 or something, or 6'5", whatever he is. And he's going to also try and play, which is just
he's going to try. Will he? I don't know. That's one of those. I think it's a recruiting pitch that they're even going to give him the shot, but it's like, dude, we're going to be playing in January. Like Big Ten basketball starts in January, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. But the thing that's crazy about that dude, not to completely side tangent, but he's like available to play. I've never seen a recruitment go that far. He's available to play this fall.
Yeah.
With the COVID stuff, his big thing was he wanted to visit these schools, and he couldn't beforehand. He said, I'm not going to commit somewhere without visiting. So, so I'm a Buckeye football nerd to the 10th degree. So that I listen to all that content. I'm getting jacked for the season.
Well, my college football team is my big school college football team is the University of Texas. So it's not a whole lot. I guess maybe you could go watch some Sark highlights.
There's optimism.
As I look at what been watching a lot lately, I did watch In the Heights over the weekend. That was pretty good.
Oh, that's great.
It got criticism, but I that was pretty good. And then
I've heard mixed reviews. I haven't checked it out yet.
My girlfriend watched it like 5 times.
I will say my wife said it's not as good as the play. I haven't seen the musical, but my wife says it's not as good as the play. I've been watching the series on Hulu called Alone. Now we're in the 2nd season, and they basically take 10 people and drop them off in very, very remote locations across this Vancouver Island, Western Canada area. And you get to bring a backpack of 10 things, and whoever lasts the longest in the wilderness.
Oh, there's not like a set amount of time. It's just whoever can do it.
Whoever lasts the longest gets 500 G's. And I was like they're real life bears and coyotes and cougars and stuff. I'm like, this is wild. And that's been a fun series. I guess it was originally on the History Channel. We watched it on Hulu. And then, I would be remiss to not point out the Stanley Cup's going on. I don't know a lot about hockey. Shout out to Ryan McCarthy. Shout out to Kyle Hall, a couple of Belly Up Sports guys that do hockey very well. Slapshot Sweethearts as well. I guess that's almost over though, and so
3-1.
We'll see how that wraps up.
Yeah.
But man, it's kind of weird to have a night without any basketball. I bet I end up watching a lot of Alone.
Yeah. I need a catch-up day.
Well, and then I'm sure Twitter's going off Chris said, with rumors about who's signing where this off season.
Yeah.
Our last segment here, and it's not actually nighttime. Right? This is full of coffee, not night beverages. But typically we wrap up on a Wednesday night write. So either stuff you're writing or reading. I am going to throw it to you, Chris, because I know you do write some for Belly Up Sports. So tell us what you've been writing lately, or what did you write lately, and what you've been reading lately.
Piece I'm really proud of is my in-depth analysis on the upcoming Space Jam movie, between what would have happened if the Monstars played the Goon Squad. If you thought me talking shit on Bobby Portis was something, I talk a little shit on Christian Laettner and Sean Bradley as well. So, and then reading, I'm trying to find a good book right now. I read a lot of comic books, so Ta-Nehisi Coates' Captain American run I'm looking at. Gonna start going through that soon. So, but I'm looking for a good a good nonfiction book to read in the next week or so as I continue my vacation.
Fair enough. JD, obviously, you talk about Ohio State on the student side of things. Talk to me about what are you reading these days? Anything for pleasure?
No writing right now. Just haven't really had anything other than some school stuff, but that was kind of a while ago. Reading. So last summer I told myself, all right, I'm going to read the Harry Potter books. I've never read the Harry Potter books. I'm going to do it. I read the first one last summer. this year was last year's school, so extremely busy. Haven't done it. Just kind of finished up my last class. I had all I had left was this internship and a sign language class to graduate. So I finished up the sign language. So I find myself with a little more free time. All I really have is the internship. So I think I'm going to try to pick that back up. I love the movies. I've always been told they're not as good as the books, and they leave out big things. So I kind of want to try the Harry Potter books. We'll see. I said I was going to do it, and I got through one in a year. So who knows? But I figure if I go out and buy them, that'll be incentive because I'll feel like I'm wasting money. Right. Once
you purchase them, you kind of have to.
Right. So, and I love the movies. I watched the movies. I'm back in Toledo this summer. I've watched the movies with my mom. She had never seen them. She knew the story, but never seen them. And it kind of got me the itch. I'm like, I said I was going to do that last summer. I enjoyed the first one. I imagine they're only going to get better. So yeah,
that makes me feel old because I remember them coming out as a kid.
I remember the big time. One of my buddies, actually, we were talking about the other day. He used to go. His grandma used to take him and his brother to the midnight release of the Harry Potter books. Like they did midnight release for books. Like
yeah,
wow.
It was like a big deal. It was like lined out the door. It was a huge deal. So,
things. So on writing stuff, we've been on the road. Obviously, I'm not like in my place. This is actually a friend of ours' place in Colorado. That's also a teacher, right? But I've written lately while I've been on the road a couple things in the Rockets. One, talking about the start of the offseason. You know, Christian Wood got votes for most improved player. Jayshawn Tate was first team all rookie. Got the number one team. Go Bucks. Got the number 2 pick in the NBA draft, and that was exciting for a number of reasons. So I wrote about the start of that. I also wrote about looking at the NBA Finals as Rockets fans. So beginning my beat stuff out, my Houston Rockets beat stuff out through Belly Up. Rockets had a lot of people in the playoffs that were no longer on the Rockets. So you got Chris Paul and PJ Tucker left, but you also had Clint Capella, Daryl Morey in the Sixers, and Harden on the Nets, obviously, a lot of different guys. And so, looking at how to root in the finals with that all going on. As far as stuff we've read, I would always promote Nikias Duncan writes good stuff for basketballnews.com. And he does a weekly roundup stuff. Non-sports stuff I read On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon-Reed. It's as someone who's from Texas, it's like kind of a Texan writing about this day that I think has become much more nationally prominent lately. But the end of slavery in Texas, which was a little bit later than the rest of the country. And then it's about experiences and more personal things about that. I finished that up last week, and now I'm diving into a book called Playing As If the World Mattered. It's actually an illustrated book, but about activism in sports. It's not very big. It wouldn't take you long to read if you actually sat down and did it, but we've been traveling, so it's taking me a little bit longer. Anyway, those are the kind of things I've been doing lately. I would love a good novel recommendation. I have read the Harry Potters, but I would love I haven't read a good novel.
Ever heard of them? They're kind of
kind of a big deal. Right. Although, to be fair, they're always worth a good reread. The last segment we do here is what we call a buzzer beater. And on a buzzer beater, what you get is I'm going to run a timer. You got about 24 seconds to get off a take. Now, we use a buzzer beater and 24 seconds because the NBA has a 24-second shot clock. But do either of you guys have a take you're ready to get off?
Yeah, I think I got one.
So we'll start with Chris. This is always fun. It's no pressure if you don't get it off in time. I almost never do. Jamal is a frequent guest. Jamal's pretty good at these. My takes take a little bit longer to get off the chest, all right? But if you're ready, I'll count you down. You good?
All right, let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go. So a lot of shade and slander being thrown at Kevin Love for being on the Olympic team. I kind of agree, even though Papa just said that the reason he's on the team is because they're trying to prepare for Rudy Gobert, who killed them last Olympics, and also there's no 3-second rule. But if Kevin Love is in shape and he has a good playoffs, I predict that he will be on the Spurs next year.
Ooh, little off-season prediction. Gotcha.
Yeah.
JD, what do you got? You got a take ready to go?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's hot takes or anything like that, but I could do a little 24-second of talking.
It's okay. Mine was pretty mild.
3.
It was like a hot take that was left out on like a counter for too long.
3, 2, 1, go.
Everyone wants to rewrite history a little bit with the Chris Paul stuff. Now everyone who I think Chris Paul was unlikable, now I think everyone thinks he's likable because he's in the finals. You should be rooting for Giannis Antetokounmpo. He is good for the league. He has stayed loyal to the small market that was loyal to him. I think he is one of the best dudes in the NBA. You never hear anything about him. In a sport where everyone's jumping ship, he wants to stay in a small market. That's awesome. Go Bucks.
Oh, right on the dot there. All right, I got mine ready to go. Or I got my topic. I said I'm like rehearsed it, but I'm going to keep it where I can see if that's okay. 3, 2, 1. So rumor has Detroit is really shopping the number 1 pick. They're really going to look to trade a guy potentially like Cade Cunningham. And to that, I just have to say, there's a reason Detroit's picking the top 5 every year, right? There's a reason Cleveland picks in the top 5 every year. They seem to think that this isn't worth get. Cade Cunningham is the guy to go with. I don't understand why they're trying to trade the pick. As a Rockets fan number 2, go ahead and draft Devin Mobley. We will happily take Cade Cunningham in Houston. That's my time. I just don't get that. I don't get where they're going there. Anyway, JD, start us off. Tell us, where can people find you on social media, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you're on frequently. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram. Twitter is JD_Davis14. It's pretty much all sports. Obviously the sports I like, but kind of whatever. Yeah, I'm going to be that Ohio State fan in the fall. So if you just want someone to push your buttons, I'll do it. And then on Instagram's JD Davis 442 altogether. Not as active, but if you follow me, I'll follow you back. And then and then I've been working. I work for the Score Zag Score. Even if it's Gonzaga basketball, even if you're not a big Gonzaga guy, Andy's does an awesome job. He just did a big mock draft. And I think he has some really good takes. So go check out that Twitter and that podcast as well.
For sure. And shout out to Andy. Andy's been on the show before, and he knows a lot more than just Gonzaga basketball.
He does.
He really,
his mock
really
draft was
Gonzaga basketball.
Two rounds deep and pretty in depth. I'm like, I couldn't tell you past like pick 6.
Well, and we may need to get him on the show again just to talk about the draft once we get past the finals.
Yeah. Can't wait for the draft.
Chris, talk to me. Where can people find you on social media, Instagram, Twitter, wherever people look for you at?
I am at the Dunniverse on Twitter. Hit me up. It's I'm a former wrestling writer, so occasionally I tweet about wrestling for my 5 years at the WWE, and also basketball and jokes because I'm a comedy nerd. And then I have nothing else to promote at the moment, but even though she's gonna, no matter where she lands, and she's gonna make a lot more money with me, I'm hoping Maria Taylor gets that bag.
For sure.
Bag.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Fuck Rachel.
You can find all my personal social media handles, or as I said, is at Ainsworth 512. It's at PAINSWRTH512. This my other show, I guess, should start with is on Twitter. It's at FN Sports 2. That's FINSPORTS, the number 2. That's a show where teachers like myself grade sports topics, and so we do different, like, very teacher-ish kind of things around sports. And then this show that you're currently watching has Instagram and Twitter. They're both at Midweek Midrange. Follow us on all those. You can find the links to the other socials in the socials, and you can find the link to our YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe and check in and watch every week. Just a couple minutes help us out a lot. But thank you all for being able to come check us out at Midweek Midrange. Thank you, Chris and JD, for showing up today, even if it's a little bit different time of day than it normally is. And as always, don't be afraid to pull up. Thanks, guys.
Bucks and 7.
Thanks, Parker. Thanks, JD.